We've reached the point in the course where we start to reflect on things we've learned over the last couple of years, teaching skills that we've developed in recent times. And today I'm talking to Christina McIntyre, lecturer in broadcast journalism, recent completer of the PGC.
Indeed.
But most importantly, formerly a television journalist, reporter and newsreader, beaming live into a million Scottish homes. Now, the area in which I've had to develop a lot of skills over the past couple of years is teaching online. And there are many, many aspects to teaching online, but one aspect that has always caused me a lot of anxiety is delivering directly to camera. And I think that causes a lot of anxiety too for university lecturers, the thought of staring down the barrel. So when I was facing this challenge, I thought to myself, who better to coach me in this area than Christina? Now, Christina, there are two different types of camera presentation, of presenting to camera, that I want to look at today, both of which I've done a lot of recently. There's the recorded stuff, first of all, where you record a short video of yourself talking, you edit it down, you upload it for students to watch. Often I know people prefer to make narrated PowerPoints because then it's just the audio that's being recorded rather than a video of their face as well. So that's one element. But secondly as well, there's live work. That's the other type I want to cover, where you're running a webinar which is going out live, and you're staring down the webcam with a little blue dot in front of you, speaking to maybe 20, 50, 100 people, none of whom you can see.
Well, I think the first thing we need to look at is preparation. You need to consider what sort of material you're going to use and of course how you want to deliver it. Now when you're dealing with cameras, probably the most important thing is eye contact. You're not looking at people, you're looking down a lens, and that can be very unfamiliar and a little bit nerve-wracking, but it's like everything in life. The first time you do it, it's pretty tough. Practice makes perfect.
Great. I mean, I found the hardest thing for me is getting going sometimes. I'm alone in a room, I'm recording myself, I'm making a little video, and I find it hard just to start because I feel a little bit silly sometimes. Now, obviously, you have years of experience of doing this professionally, so that's less of an issue for you. But I know I feel anxious just making a...
I still feel silly,
Yeah?
I wouldn't worry about it. Yeah, it's the comfort zone, isn't it? I mean, you're a very experienced lecturer, you've got far more experience than I have. You probably think, and you guys are the same, you probably think absolutely nothing about standing up in a lecture theatre, delivering your material to perhaps hundreds of people. I absolutely hate it. I can see the whites of their eyes, somebody's playing with their mobile phone, 2 or 3 of them are chatting. I think that's quite distracting, and I find that a very unnatural situation to be in. So just as you have overcome those fears about delivering in a lecture theatre, so too can you overcome the element of discomfort, shall we say, of standing looking into a camera. The camera has to become your friend and not your enemy.
In the end, I start to get going by just talking and knowing that I'll make mistakes. But because it's recorded, knowing that it's okay to make mistakes, I can edit those out later. If I make a glaring error, I can just stop, regather myself, start again from where I left off, and trust myself to cut those bits out later. In some ways that can be more relaxing than doing something completely live when there's no second chance. I know we'll look at that later.
We will. Yeah, it's entirely different. Just one point on perhaps how you set up the shoot. When I was at STV, sometimes we had to do what we called as live. In other words, it looked as though it was live and it wasn't. So it was essentially, you know, the reporter standing, delivering to camera the whole story, no pictures, no nothing. Quite a good cheat mechanism, and I think you can do it with pretty much any technology, is simply to vary the shot size. So for example, start on a wide shot. This is a wide shot. When Samurai use the other camera, it's more of a close-up shot. So what I would suggest you do is maybe break your material down into, say, 3 sections. So perhaps start on a wide, your delivery, hello, I'm so-and-so, start. Get to part of it, stop, have your break, regroup, alter the shot size, make it more of a close-up, do the second part, same again, alter it back to the wide, doesn't need to be exactly the same as the one before, and do it again. And that's 3 clear edit points, and it actually looks quite good. It's not obvious. You know, sometimes people use a white flash. I don't like it.
No,
you use a white flash, don't you?
I do a fade through black.
Of course you do.
That's what I do. I know. It's
fade
not
through black.
It's not terribly good.
No, it's okay.
But no, I know
fine.
that's kind of my next step of how to make mine look a bit more professional. I think is to take your advice on changing the shot, because it is unreasonable, I think, to expect a presenter to just be able to reel off 10 minutes in one take.
It's impossible.
You have to be really, really good to do that.
It's not
just not going to happen.
No.
Right? So you're going to have to stop from time to time and think, what is coming up next structurally? You know, can I look at my notes? Can I just check what's going on? And that's a great way to do it, I think. Can we just talk a bit? I bring this up because my mother always used to moan to me about slouching. What my posture generally, whether I'm sitting, whether I'm even walking down the road. And I'm always very conscious.
My mother gets on to me for exactly the same
really?
thing.
Okay. It doesn't matter even when you're on the telly. Your mother still is there.
It's a
watching.
mother thing.
Fine. Okay. So now I'm conscious that I should be nice archback, sitting up. Again, you will have had to think about these things in your internal monologue, knowing that you're broadcasting to a lot of people at home. How do you deal with that sort of physical presentational aspect?
Well, let's look at slouching first off.
Okay.
Are we standing or are we sitting? I'm guessing most of you would choose to sit, whether you were preparing recorded or live material. So, for example, when we came into the studio today, I said to Sam, in the nicest possible way, if you could put your bottom right at the back of your seat. So you can feel the back of the seat just behind you, and it allows you to perhaps lean forward, lean back, which is quite natural. I mean, remember what we're doing here is having a conversation. So right now I'm having a conversation with you. Now I'm having a conversation with Sam. But I think the key is to be comfortable. Put your bottom right at the back of the seat. Enable yourself to tilt forward. Try and think about having shoulders back and down. And another thing is, have your feet on the floor. You know how some people talk with their hands? I think I'm quite guilty of it. Depending on your shot size will determine on how acceptable or not that is. In a wide shot like this, absolutely no problem. If it was a close-up shot to here and you started to see a little hand creeping in, that's not going to work at all. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to clasp your hands. Because trust me, if you clasp your hands, stopping them moving, something else is going to move instead, and it's probably going to be your feet. And you'll start drumming your feet and all the rest of it, or you'll be shuggling about and it just looks really bad. So, to recap, when you know you've got a reasonably wide or even mid shot, don't be frightened about using your hands, and don't sit with them clasped unless you do that naturally. You've got your pen. But if we change the shot size, as we described earlier, when you're doing a recorded piece, and we maybe do go to a close-up, that's when you just need to be a little bit more aware of it. They can move down here, but I don't want them moving up here. And again, we're using clip mics, so they're onto our tops. Depending on the technology you're using, that may or may not be the case, but don't want to be doing that. You just heard a bang, bang, bang.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can tell now that my students will be critiquing all the videos I've made and uploaded on those very high criteria.
Indeed.
One last thing, just for recording, generally for recording pieces, for the way we set up. The other thing that you said to me when I arrived at your office today was, you're not wearing that, are you? Quite rightly. I know you're always very professionally dressed for assignments like this, Assignations. You have to be careful about the things that you wear on camera, though, don't you? Because it can be quite visually distracting, some types of clothing.
I suppose two things related to that same point: what you're wearing and what's behind you. Right. What's your backdrop? I teach broadcast journalism, and a lot of it is video work. And you know, if I had £1 for every time I said to the student that was a hellish backdrop you used, I'd be a very rich woman. We've got a studio backdrop today. It does what it says in the tin. So if you're recording something at home, I would suggest probably something, I know it's going to sound awful, a plain wall is absolutely fine, because this is learning technology. This is not a telly program. It's not a creative video. My students would get into trouble for the blank wall. You won't. So let's not have the backdrop distracting. I mean, you see lamps and they look as though they're coming out the back of your head. You've no idea how daft that looks. So just be very aware of what's behind you. In terms of what you wear, you know, it's how do you want to come across? Yes, I was rude. I said, is that what you're wearing? But actually, I'm not surprised, because I know part of your teaching style is you want to come across as being approachable. I do not. So that's absolutely fine. But, you know, don't go for big patterns. Don't go for big, bold statements. Yeah, I've got a little bit of jewellery on, but it's nowhere near my microphone. Guys, it's common sense. Think about, I suppose, sometimes you would also think about what you're talking about. You know.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
But yeah, understated. Does that help?
My concessions today
You pass.
are plain unpatterned shirt.
Correct.
More buttons done up than usual, I hope. I'm looking more modest. Not that I'm immodest, but...
No, but you're coordinating-ish.
Thank you. I'm not a great tie wearer, after all.
Yeah, well, I suppose a tie in our environment is seen as quite formal. If that's what you teach in, do your webinar.
Absolutely.
If it's not, don't.
Yeah.
That's as far as I would go with that.
Great. Some wonderful, useful, practical points there, I think, about recording and doing camera work. I want to move on now to the live stuff, more like everyday teaching.
Yeah, the webinar is a slightly different kettle of fish. It's what I would call live work. Now, I started live broadcasting at the age of 21, which, as you can see, is not exactly yesterday. Here in the GCU television studio, we have autocue, also known as teleprompter. Now, what that means is the script can appear on the camera lens. So basically, you can sit and look into the camera and read what's there. Now, you won't have that luxury when you're doing your webinar, so I'm not going to use it today because that wouldn't be fair. Let's talk about how we would prepare to do a webinar. There are two schools of thought. The first one is to write a script and to try and memorize it, but I would suggest to you that will only work for really short pieces. The second is to do bullet points, perhaps highlight them, and be prepared to ad-lib around them. I've kind of done both here. I've written a script, but I've highlighted points that I can look at as this webinar type thing proceeds. So if we can just go to the wide shot now. So yeah, here it is. The script is in front of me. I've got a few bits and pieces highlighted, like presentation. Oh, how very exciting. So when we're preparing to do any kind of broadcasting work, I know we're academics, but I have to say, keep the language simple and keep your sentences short. I know you've maybe not thought about this, but long sentences, you may well run out of breath. Is it acceptable to have your papers in front of you? Yes, it is. For a wide shot like this, I don't think that there's anything wrong. And if you look at television news bulletins, when you've got a wide shot of the presenters, you'll see them with their scripts in front of them. There's a very good reason for this. They're using autocue as we've described, but if autocue goes down, the bulletin isn't going to stop. They're not going to say, oh dear, autocue's down, we'll come back to you in 5 minutes. They have to continue reading, so they will go down and read the script, try and maintain eye contact, but you do get a bit of the nodding dog, easy for me to say, going on, so it's not great. So eye contact is absolutely massive. So whether you're doing your scripted version or your bullet points, just think, I'm looking into that camera lens right now. So you've got one shot at it because it's live. What happens when you make a mistake? You're going to make mistakes. Do you stand in a lecture theatre and deliver the perfect lecture? Is it word perfect? No, it's not. Webinar is going to be the same. I would suggest if it's a little error, a hesitation, a stumble, a slight mispronunciation, get over it. Gloss over it, don't refer to it, and simply move on. But what happens when you give out misinformation? Let's say I attribute the Oedipus complex to Carl Jung. Oops, Freudian slip. I need to correct myself. I would say, oh, of course, I meant to say Sigmund Freud. So small error, get over it, move on. Larger error where it's misinformation, correct yourself, but again, don't get your knickers in a twist. You might be a little nervous thinking about doing your first webinar, and that's understandable. It's just a matter of familiarising yourself with the technology, relaxing into it and practising. I think there's a strong argument it's actually easier than doing a lecture in front of hundreds of students because you can't see them. You'll need to practice. Familiarity is the key. Just as the studio is the natural habitat for me, it's not threatening. You can get that feeling with the webcam too. Eye contact, I think, is probably the most important learning point that there is. So right now, for example, I can see a good friend of mine standing right behind this camera. She's nodding, smiling, encouraging me. And that makes me feel that I can continue, get into some momentum. That's in my mind. In reality, I'm looking at you.
Thank you, Christina. Very useful. Thanks for your time.